Welcome to today's Insta Live. And I know we haven't done an Insta Live in a long time, but today we're going to talk about a very important topic. We're talking about lifestyle and fertility. And I know it's something that a lot of you are looking for. So we're going to bring Suvir to speak with us about this topic today. And we want everyone to just, if you have any questions about this topic, just write them in the chat function, because we want you to feel supported and we want all your questions answered today. Hello, Suvir.
Hello, Andrea. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this Insta Live today to talk about such an important topic.
It's a pleasure. It's always nice to speak about things that are really, it's quite topical as well at the moment, so it's nice.
Yeah, I think it's quite common because it does affect our lifestyle. It affects our life in so many levels. And when we're trying to conceive and we're being asked to make all these changes to our lifestyle and our habits, it can be quite difficult. Is this something that you see at the clinic quite a lot? People trying to adjust their lifestyle to improve the chances of treatment?
Yes, I mean, it's a very common question. Everyone wants to know what can they do. And it's almost like, you know, when you take exams in school and at the last minute, you're like, okay, what can I do? What can I do? But actually, if we step back a little, I think it's actually really helpful to consider, you know, what it is that we're trying to achieve. So, you know, when you're trying to have a pregnancy, you're really, it's like a flower. You know, you have like a plant trying to put out a flower. So you have to look after yourself. You have to be in great shape, and both mentally and physically. And I think there's a lot of information. The problem with the world today is there's too much information, I think. And it can be daunting for patients, you know. You can spend hours and hours online and you end up with a different kind of neuroses about the food and what you should do. And oh my gosh, it would be very difficult.
It can be
But
to understand what we should be doing and not doing. You're right. But, you know, I was reading this article a few months ago about the sperm quality that has been reducing over the last few years, and it's related to lifestyle. So our grandparents are not as fertile as our husbands, and that is very scary to think about that.
you mean our husbands are not as fertile as our grandparents?
Exactly.
Yes, the other way around. Yeah, so that's actually, it's a very good point. So there was a seminal study that came out of UC San Francisco, where they looked at sperm quality over decades, and they noticed a decline over about 40 years. And they then tried to pinpoint what might cause this. And they had such a broad sort of demographic of patients. It wasn't just, you know, I think when we think of lifestyle, we think of what we eat, how we sleep, and, you know, how we look after ourselves. But it's actually more than that. And that's why I think it's really topical at the moment. It's the environment too. It's the environment that we live in. Because one of the biggest factors they determined is actually your air quality.
Yeah.
Right? The air that you breathe, it goes inside you, and the pollutants can actually affect your reproductive health. And they found that people who didn't live as close to main roads or busy roads actually had better quality sperm than people who did. So I know with lockdown, it's been difficult, but it has its silver lining in that there were less cars on the road for the last year. And I think some people have moved a bit further out as well. So hopefully that has its own benefits.
Absolutely. And I think talking about pollution, that's probably one of the biggest changes, isn't it? If people do decide to move because of pollution, that's a big change in their lives. But
yes.
Also, I would say that other habits like the diet or the exercise, they are potentially easier in a sense to implement, but more difficult to stick to as well.
Yes, I mean, they are things that we have more control over. in that it's easier to change your diet than it is to move house and change job. But it is, like you said, it's very difficult to often stick with. And I think it's important to have some perspective. You know, we do get patients who come to us who say, and we tell them it would be in their interest to perhaps reduce some weight because it has an adverse impact on their fertility. But actually, but when you first tell them that, I think, oh, you can see their face kind of drop because they think, oh my gosh, how am I going to get over this mountain? But actually, it's not that bad because yes, we want you to lose some weight and we want you to look after yourself. But the most important thing is a bit of perspective in that don't become neurotic about it. We don't want you to get more stressed about having a healthy life than it is to actually have a healthy life.
Yeah, so we're talking about trying our best, and I usually talk about doing our best 80% of the time, but still allowing some time in our lives to eat other things that do bring us joy, or doing other things in our lifestyles that we do like to do. So I feel that a big part of not being able to stick to those changes is the lack of support, because I do see a lot of clinics and doctors saying you need to lose weight, but then patients are not given the support to achieve that goal, for example. How does it work at your clinic? Are patients given support whilst they're trying to optimize these several aspects of their health?
We do. I mean, we try to support them as much as...
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I think I've covered my microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. We try to support them as much as we can, but we're a clinic and we're limited in what we can do with a patient. So I was actually wondering what sort of support you might be able to offer to patients who are trying to make small changes to their lifestyle.
Yeah, we have a collaboration going on at the moment with the Enhanced Fertility Program, and making changes is a big part of what we do. So we help patients stick to a program in an environment where they're not feeling alone. So they are being supported by nurses and psychologists whilst they're making those changes. And it's the accountability part of the process as well. So we're helping patients by telling them what they can do, but also being there for the times when it doesn't work and the plan needs to be adjusted. And I think making the changes that matter is also a big step in the process, because you were mentioning that there's so much information online, and so many times patients end up trying to make more changes that actually don't have a big impact in the outcome of treatment. So I think sticking to the things that they actually need to change can be quite empowering as well. So having that source of trustworthy information on what can actually make a difference in their treatment.
Yes, it's important to focus on, like you said, the things that matter. And I like your 80-20 rule where, 80% of the time you live like a saint and the 20% you maybe let your hair down. And I think, and so what would you say would be, the top 5 things to look out for on lifestyle? And we'll compare notes.
Yeah, I think, so one of the first questions that I ask myself is it worth it to make any of those 5 or 6 things that we need to change? And we have this idea that women have a fixed number of eggs, but what a lot of us don't know is that the eggs actually mature every month in the cycle. So we have the opportunity to give these eggs the best possible environment so that they mature in a healthy way without any chromosomical abnormalities, for example. And for men produce sperm virtually every single day of their lives, almost until the day they die. So we have, and it takes about 74 days for sperm to go from that one very simple cell to the form that we know with the head and the tail. So during this maturation process of both the eggs and the sperm, we have the opportunity to improve the quality. And that's why I think all these things are really, really important to talk about, so that when patients go to the clinic, you have the best possibly eggs and sperm to work with, because that's the material. You can't change that. You need to work with what you have, what the patients have in them. But I would say diet is probably a big one.
So yeah, I would agree with that. Diet is definitely important, but I think when it comes to diet, like I said, it is very easy to become quite neurotic. And I think the
Mhm.
advice that we always try to give people is, enjoy your food, have tasty food, but have good, nutritious food. So, eat lots of vegetables, eat lots of fruit, especially in the summer. It's nice, you get nice fruit and vegetables. Try and have a high protein and high fiber diet, but enjoy it. Make sure it's tasty.
Yeah, one of my tips is to subscribe to a vegetable delivery. I've done that myself. So, I'm not dependent on me actually choosing the vegetables every week in the supermarket, because every Monday I will receive a box of vegetables
Yeah,
automatically, and that actually forces us to eat more vegetables
that's
because
true.
we're cooking with what we have on the fridge. So I think that could possibly be a very practical way of introducing more vegetables into our
Absolutely.
diet.
And that's good because you get the stuff that's seasonal as well and fresh, and it's the right time of the year to eat it. So it probably tastes a bit better as well.
Yeah, and I think the second thing is exercise. And, you know, that's a tricky one because of lockdown. I stopped going to the gym, for example. I'm not as active as I used to be. Um, I still walk the dog. So, how much would you say would be a normal or a recommended dose of activity?
A bit of gentle exercise every day would probably be ideal, right? So, and that might be a 20-minute walk
Yeah.
just outside. Get outside, have a bit of fresh air. And it's nice in the day, particularly if you try and get out while it's light.
Mm.
Have a break from your work. You're not staring. And if people are working from home, you're staring at the screen all day. Get out, force yourself out for 20 minutes. And one, it'll clear your mind, which is nice. And it gives you a bit of gentle exercise. So it might just be a walk. But otherwise, if you do sort of enjoy aerobic exercise, maybe a few times a week, a half an hour to an hour would be great. That's all you're really looking for. It's nothing too intense, but it keeps your cardiac activity good, and it maintains your aerobic health. I enjoy. I mean, actually, I've had the opposite experience. So I'm a keen cyclist, and I'm much fitter this year than I've ever been in my life
Really?
because of lockdown. It's forced me to do something, and I've started cycling 3 times a week. It's fantastic. So I think we've seen that in the clinic too. Some people have been a lot healthier this year. Other people have found it really difficult, particularly if they rely on a gym or something. But
Well,
I think it's in,
I
no, no,
did
go
buy
on.
I did buy a treadmill, you know.
Yeah, no, but that's hard. I mean, I think it's important that we do enjoy the outdoors. Get out, get some fresh air and a change of scenery because it's easy to go stir crazy when you sit at home and you stare at the four walls, and that's hard to motivate yourself.
I think walking the dog has been keeping me sane, actually.
Yeah, and a dog will definitely keep you busy because a dog has to go out, so they'll make sure you get out.
Tip number one, get a vegetable subscription. Tip number two, get a
Get a
dog.
dog.
Okay. And now, how about caffeine? Because I know a lot of people start today with coffee. And it's still a bit uncertain, isn't it, about how
So
harmful it can be?
yeah, the jury's out on whether it affects fertility. But there was a study that showed excessive caffeine is detrimental. And
Mhm.
that's what you want to avoid. So the recommended sort of maximum allowance for a day is 100 milligrams. So
Mhm.
that's essentially one strong cup of coffee a day.
Yeah.
So if you have that, it's okay. It's not too harmful. Now, if you're drinking 3 or 4 cups of strong coffee a day, that can be a bit problematic, both
So,
for your fertility, but also for your heart. So
so we can change things like having tea, which has less caffeine, for example.
yeah, you can have tea, or and particularly if you have green tea rather than black tea, or if you simply try and wean yourself down a little bit from the 3 cups, yeah, have something else. And as it's starting to warm up, sort of cooler drinks are quite nice in the summer. Um, but I'm quite traditional. In the morning, first thing, you want a cup of tea or coffee.
Yeah.
But 1 cup, it's not going to kill you. It's okay.
Yeah.
So don't become completely neurotic, but do try and reduce your caffeine intake. And particularly, it's actually important that you don't have it in the evening
Mm-hmm.
because it can affect your sleep. So it is
And that's,
important. Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
very important for you to get rest. And
Mhm.
so if you have caffeine late at night, it can affect your sleep quality, and we don't want that to happen.
And it can be quite tricky because a lot of patients who are trying to conceive also may be feeling sad or depressed, and that ends up affecting their sleep as well.
Yeah. Uh,
It's like,
so
isn't it? So it can be difficult to break.
it is. It can be a vicious cycle, but I think at least starting with sort of weaning off the caffeine in the evening is an easy thing to make a change on.
Mm,
And like you said, you can have some other kind of hot drink if it's comforting that doesn't have as much caffeine.
absolutely. And I've heard a few years ago about this strategy, psychological strategy for people who have sleep problems, and it's called paradoxical intention. Because when we have a sleep problem, we are often forcing ourselves, we want to go to sleep, right? So we're trying really hard, but the more we try, the more difficult it is to go to sleep. So the paradoxical intention is a strategy that invites people to try and stay awake as much as possible. So you're in bed, but you're trying to keep your eyes awake. So to
So
an extreme, but then you get so tired that you fall asleep. So
reverse
it's,
cycle.
yeah.
I mean, I think
So
that's a very good idea to try. I mean, the other trick is find a book that you want to read but isn't too interesting, and then
yeah,
you'll sleep. But
yeah, that's it. And no screens. I think a lot of people are on their phones at night, and I think the light ends up affecting our ability, or if we're watching something that is too stimulant, a lot of activity on the screen, for example. So maybe not having screens, closing the windows, having a nice, quiet environment. And there's even sleep meditation as well that invites us into this calm state so that we can gently fall asleep. That can also be helpful.
yeah, or even, and I've heard other people say that they do a bit of like gentle yoga for 5-10 minutes in the evening, because it sort of winds you down and it stretches you out, which is a nice feeling, and then your body is very relaxed, and you can go to sleep. So just a 5-10 minute stretching session can also be quite nice just to relax you. But as you say, it's
Yeah.
important to try and avoid screens right before you go to bed, particularly if you do struggle to go to sleep.
And Suvir, now two habits that maybe don't affect a lot of people, but they might affect some: smoking and alcohol. Um,
You
I
would be
think there's,
surprised as to how many people it still affects.
yeah, I think the younger generation, it's my perception, they're not smoking as much as the older generation, but it's probably one of the worst habits that does affect DNA in both eggs and sperm, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It is. It, so tobacco is classified as toxic, or tobacco smoke, and it is as bad as any sort of plastic pollutant that you can think about. Um, the old saying is that it's only legal because of the big tobacco industry from decades ago, and if that weren't the case, it wouldn't be legal. It's pretty nasty stuff, and I think, as you say, I mean, the good thing is in the younger generations, I think the number of people smoking has declined quite significantly because people have become aware of the health risks of it. But it is still present in the society, and it is important to try and quit smoking if you do smoke. One of the myths that we always hear from patients is, "Oh, I've given up cigarettes. It's great, but I've started e-cigarettes or vaping." I mean, it's pretty much the same. You're just getting it in a different form. So it is important to give up that habit as soon as you possibly can, because it impacts your fertility, but it does, as you say, it damages the genetic material. And that, so you might have a pregnancy, but you might have a miscarriage during the pregnancy, or worse, you might have a genetic abnormality or a disability in a born child. So it is important to try and give that one up.
You know, there was a study in Portugal a few years ago on Freshman's Week. So they tested men's sperm during that week when men are known to drink and smoke and eat all the things that are bad for you. And then they tested the sperm again 6 months later, and there was huge differences between that week and the 6 months later. So things can really have an impact, but also lots of those things, if we stop doing them, it gives us some hope that the damage is potentially reversible.
Yes, I mean, yeah, the good news is none of this is permanent, as long as it's, you know, there's no sort of cancer involved or anything. But as you say, all the effects are temporary. And so if you do give up these habits, things will improve.
And the last one I wanted to talk about is, and we started talking a little bit about these toxins, but the exposure to BPA, phthalates, plastics that can be quite hard to escape these days, because we are just so used to having everything, and everything that we buy comes in plastic, from food. If we buy chicken, fish, whatever it comes, salad, it comes in a plastic container. If we buy our products to clean the house, they come in a plastic container. So how bad is it affecting our fertility, these kind of products?
So they are bad. There's, for example, there's the American Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology put out a statement saying, we're declaring this as a consensus statement to say that these things are toxic and should be avoided, and we should take precautionary steps to avoid them. Now, it's easy for people to say it, but as you say, the practical situation is that everything comes in plastic these days. And it is hard to avoid. But it's also the stuff that you don't see. Okay, so the plastics that you touch, fine, you know, you can live with them. Your body doesn't really absorb them. But the things that can get absorbed are the microplastics that get shed. And so it's important to try and get food that is minimally packaged as you can. But more important than that is actually food that has a sort of plastic coating, or fruit that can be waxed, for example. You want to try and avoid those things, because those can leach into what you eat, and then that goes into your body. And similarly, you get sort of facial or skin products that have plastic particles in them, and again, those can leach into your body. So you really want to try and avoid plastic in the things that might enter your body.
A few of the things that I changed around the house is using glass containers, for example. If we are heating food in the microwave, or if I make soup and then I want to store it, then the heat doesn't allow plastic to leach. So
exactly. So that is, you brought up a very good point, actually, which is that if you have plastic when it's cold and you have food sitting in, it's all right, it doesn't leach too much. But when you heat it up, that's actually when the microparticles start to leach. So it is important that you heat food only in glass containers. Similarly, keep your water in a glass or metal container. One, it tastes a bit better, but two, it doesn't leach the microplastics.
Another thing that I've been trying recently is a shampoo that comes in a soap shape instead of coming in a bottle, a plastic bottle. So
how is it?
I think it's okay. I just found it at Boots the other day and said, I'm going to try this, because it's just one less bottle that I'm using around the house. And I think the other thing can be, when we go to the supermarket next time and we're trying to look at the products we use to clean around the house, maybe try and choose organic or products that don't have scent.
Try to choose the less toxic stuff. the stuff that contains a bit less bleach. I mean, there are times when you need some bleach or something, but try to choose things that are a bit more environmentally friendly. And this is actually, it's important, not really for your fertility as such immediately, but because the more chemicals we spray around, it leaches into the environment. What survives off the environment? We all do. We get our food from the environment. It's a big cycle at the end of the day. So whatever you spray is going to at some point end up in someone's diet potentially. So that's why when you don't need to use sort of harsh chemicals, you avoid it.
So we're talking about changes that are not only important for now and for the treatment process and having a baby, but also changes that are good for our life in the future as a family. We want to bring up this child in a better world with a great health, if possible, with less toxins, with less plastics in his system.
Yeah, and you want the child to be fertile as well in due course. So it's important that we look in the long term and we do our little bits to help.
Absolutely.
That's a very good point.
And Suvir, I know you have a webinar coming up on this topic with lots of key speakers. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's next Friday evening. I think it's 7:30 on Friday the 20th or 21st. I can never remember dates. I apologize. I will look this up. The 21st. And it's we're privileged to have two very distinguished speakers to speak about fertility and nutrition in particular. So we have Dr. Geeta Venkat, who's our clinical lead, and we have Dr. Norbert Gleischer, who's the clinical lead at the Center for Human Reproduction in New York. So I'm sure the two of them will have a very insightful talk, and I'm sure the Q&A will be quite informational as well. Informative is the right word I'm looking for.
And how can people register to these webinars?
So, I think we've been putting out stuff on social media, but have a look on our website in the webinars section. If you go there, it'll show you the upcoming webinar and you can register. So we're trying to do a series of webinars. We're doing one a month, covering various topics that relate to fertility. So we did one, I think, on COVID recently, and then we're doing this one on nutrition, and we're doing one specifically on men's fertility the next month, because that's often overlooked. So we thought we'll try and address that one as well.
That's a really important factor as well, because men are usually not as assessed as part of treatment, but a lot of problems are on the male side. So that's definitely going to be an interesting one. I've added the link to your registration as well in my Instagram bio. So okay. I'll leave this video in our IG, and everyone who wants to register, if they want to go through my link in bio, the link is also there. And we'll continue until next week.
All right, thank you very much, Andreia. It was a really nice talk. I enjoyed it. It's a subject that's quite close to my heart, I think, because it's the one thing when it comes to fertility that we have a bit of control over. So I'd like to thank you really for your time.
Thank you so much, Suvir. It was lovely talking to you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.